Hi, we are at the Yarmouth Frame and Gallery. I'm here today with John Bowdren for some gallery conversations.
Good morning. Good morning, Beth.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, this was something new we're doing. We're going to do a little bit of talking about John's work and his inspiration for it, techniques and that sort of thing. So let's get started.
Very good.
I always love the story behind the artist. I love to start that way.
Okay.
We all got there somehow.
Right.
So how was it that you heard your calling to do this professionally?
Always, as a little kid, copying, drawing, and then went to school in New Hampshire, Plymouth State College, for art in general. And then I ran out of art classes after about a year and a half, and concentrated and went to the School of Visual Arts in New York to study illustration. And
So how did you get into the New York school? Did you have to do what do you call it, portfolio and all
review,
of that?
yeah, and a lot of sort of figure drawings and some paintings I'd done, and so yeah, that was and that I'm always interested in editorial. Back then in pen and ink and wood blocks, so
Which you still do.
yeah, and did mostly the editorial illustration for about 10 years, and then we moved up to Maine and started looking around, and it was a lot nicer to paint boats and trees than toothpaste tubes and things. So
Yeah.
so my focus shifted, and then about 12 plus years ago got into sculpture, and now that's about half of my work. So.
Right. I know we show a little bit of your sculpture, but you're year-round at June Lacomb's.
June, yes.
Yeah, it's a huge sculpture garden out there, absolutely beautiful, and some of John's pieces. I'll post a link in the description box below so that you can go and see some of that too.
Right.
Yeah.
And let's see, so yeah, a lot of early inspirations were sort of advertising and surrealism,
Yeah.
just playing with scale and discordant things working together, to sort of shift your mind over a little and get you interested in, and that's how in illustration in the article that was your drawing for.
So do you think that that's where you get the, having a focus in a piece of work, or that something that draws you in? Do you contribute that back to the illustration? And
yeah, it's been a while since I've done any, but in that case you're sort of serving something else. You're trying to
Sure.
Your a visual interest to pull the reader in, and in this case it's its own thing.
True. Yeah.
But there is usually in my work something that catches my attention, sort of a little aha moment, and try to share that, whether it's the light, on trees or a building, or to make an interesting composition, and so that moving away from the written to the.
It's always so validating to sell your first work of art to a stranger. What was that like for you?
My first one was interesting. My freshman year at Plymouth State College, my roommate had a friend who came in, and I was working on a painting. I think the assignment was about commercialism, and it was a bomb, like a World War II bomber. With the bomb bay doors open, and there's toothpaste tubes dropping out, and so I was playing with scale and just again two different things combined together. And he loved it so much he offered me, I think it was like $35, and I said, oh. I think so he bought it, and it was it was very nice and came in handy then. But it wasn't really an issue. I always sort of thought of the work going out as little ambassadors, of sort of my way of seeing and trying to express things. And it's always so interesting when people connect with that, and I know how I feel when I see some piece of art that all of a sudden, oh, it's like just pulls you in. So looking to make that connection, and and how people respond. So
yeah,
it's never been a like issue.
Right. It is like sending out little children,
Yeah, in a way.
And it's a lot to hang something in the gallery, and it's like, part of you there on the wall.
Yeah.
But, which brings me to ask you that, artists face so many personal obstacles, from self-critic to the professional critic. What have been some of your biggest creative challenges?
More technical. If I can back up a little, in New York, I did a lot of karate. It was interesting, and it was more about a total thing than avoiding situations than it was and it was physical, which was nice. But we used to do a practice after we worked out, and it was called ren ma, and it's a Japanese word meaning to polish, like a mirror or your soul, and the idea was to be kind to yourself. And people, a lot of artists or writers or creative people are pretty tough on themselves.
Yes.
And the illustration side, for about 10 years, I'd run around the city with my portfolio, and you'd meet with art directors, and they'd open it up, nope. Yeah, get out of here. So you sort of develop a thick skin, and you're like, okay, but with the painting and other things, it's if you build up a body of work and comfortable with it. So the technical, or more like how to get the idea either on canvas or 3D. What are the technical issues, and solving those are the creative things.
So do you sketch your canvas before you paint it?
I'll try to do a little sketch on site if I don't really paint plein air because the light moves so quick. I paint kind of slow, but I try to get the composition down, sort of muscle memory, and then take pictures and work from those. The sculptures are a lot more sort of abstract ideas, like the sun on the water or a bird in flight, and try to pare them way down to sort of what's interesting that caught my eye there. And for those, I do tons of drawings. I tend to work larger, and then I'll do sort of full scale, for a big plank piece. So I'll have the whole thing sketched out, and especially if there's like some of the raindrop things where they're planks with pierced and rings around the precision of where those drops are in terms of the composition.
Right. And do you ever think about the location where they're going to end up, and the scale in comparison to? Or, I mean, you've got a lot of installations out there, and they all look fabulous.
I've done a few commissions, but it's usually people respond and then find a spot.
Nice. Yeah. So it really is all about the work.
Yeah, putting in the work. When I first, went to college, it was just draw, and just to be able to get in your head down. So that's always, and it's fun looking at other artists' sketchbooks and sketchy paintings, just to see how they're thinking and application.
Yeah. Wow. All right. Well, maybe now you could tell us about the composition and palette of this work of art.
This is in Harpswell, a little cove, and it's I think like a fish bait building that is up on stilts to get it out of the tide. And one of the pluses of the illustration background is editing, having the freedom.
That artistic license.
Yeah, like the people weren't there, so I added the people, and this is me. So I knew what I wanted, a guy with like a rope, so I set up a camera and took a bunch of pictures till I got that right. And then, so this is playing sort of with warms and cools, and the foreground cool and sort of in shadow with the light hitting the building. Another inspiration is Edward Hopper, and one of his quotes is, "I just like to paint." I think paraphrasing. I just like to paint the light on things. You know, and oh yeah,
Yeah,
that's
nice.
the way it highlights. So this is sort of end of the day, and they're talking.
Gives you a little bit of an idea of what the tides in Maine are like too.
The 9-foot tide.
Yeah, the further you go,
Yeah.
and the bigger the tides.
And this is just sort of the way the light sort of casts across, and keeping these all warm, and having fun in the sky. The skies take a while because it's a lot of sort of back and forth blending, and then sort of there, not there, with the clouds.
It's nice the way you have it reflected in the windows.
Yeah. And in terms of inspiration, I really like the working waterfronts, and how people and the things they use, like boats and wharves, affect the environment, but also the other way around, how the environment, impacts them, and the way people, their personalities come out, and how they take care of their boats, or and store stuff, and then just the structures of the geometric against the natural is a nice contrast.
Very nice. Because boats are one of your favorites.
Yeah, just the curves, and
They're hard to do.
and the use, I just that they're there, sort of vessels for, it's a sort of an extension of the person, and abstracted.
Yeah, and I can tell you from having the gallery that people come in, and the people that love boats, love boats,
Yeah.
will be like, oh, the curve's all wrong on that
Right.
one, but for your work, they're always like, that's perfect.
Right. Yeah, boats, the curves, and I should know more, and I have a subscription to Wooden Boat magazine, so I'm always doing research, but I try not to be, the precision is sort of secondary to the effect that I'm trying to get out of the image.
It's all coming through. And then the way that you place like the moorings and the buoys and that kind of thing too. And we'll take a look at some other ones. Yeah, that's probably all part of that inviting design for you.
Quite a few years ago, I went to a talk given by Neil Welliver, who's an interesting painter. You'll see his paintings in museums, and talking about composition. And he would talk about getting rid of the horizon and letting sort of the sky speak in the water, and that talked to me a lot. So it sort of brings the focus in, and you'll see in a lot of paintings just sort of no horizon, but you'll still see clouds and reflections in the sky. And that zone where sort of earth, sky, and land meet is very interesting. Just the intersection of systems, movement, and tides.
Very nice. All right, we're going to change locations so we can show you some other work, and we'll be right back. So here we are with some other works of John, some of his sculpture here and here. And I'm here to ask you, John, I've come to understand that an artist who's developed their own style has also made their peace with who they are at their core being. It's kind of like an unapologetic reflection of that core being in their works of art. For me, John, I find that your work has that energy of like a quiet, meditative moment, and that kind of vibe for me. And when you were speaking earlier about the karate and the, rub on and rub off, sorry, that popped into my head, the Karate Kid. But that whole philosophy around, how much of that comes, just tell us about that.
It sort of comes from, I think, observing nature and sort of being open. The sort of key moment that I thought about this a little was I did a program with the National Parks with the Student Conservation Association. I did a couple of those, but the first one was in Bryce Canyon in Utah, and we were doing trail maintenance as a group of kids. I think it was about 17 or 18, and there's a big storm coming in. You could sort of see it on the horizon, and so we sort of took a break, and we all just sort of went and had a little sit down. But I remember just sitting by the side of the trail, and there's this little, this woods and interesting lighting and contrasting skies, and there's this little sapling plant, and just the harmonics, good vibes or vibrations.
Yeah.
It was just like open, and got a feeling that everything was the way it should be, and things were growing, the earth, and so that was sort of a aha moment, just sort of expanding out, and everything was okay, and that's sort of been a core going forward.
So it was a moment that you really couldn't let go of. I mean, that was like one of, as you said, an aha moment that stuck.
Yeah.
And, I can just envision that huge sky, storm coming in, and this tiny little sapling, and it's kind of got that dark and that light.
Right. And and just being open, and I guess I'm a pretty visual person, and it wasn't related to like the written word or anything, but just sort of, and it wasn't like an act of creativity. It was just allowing to be sort of in the moment again.
Yeah.
And
did you have anything to draw with at that moment?
No,
So
it
you
didn't
really
even,
had to.
Yeah, it didn't really affect me that way. Like some other things, like gotta capture. But this was just like, let it go. Let it seep in and out. But other things are a real liking for Japanese visual culture, and again back to the sort of meditative, waiting for the moment, and then boom, working, doing the piece. And,
so what's a typical day like for you? I know we did a show for you, and we had a postcard and all of that, and you had talked a little bit about your process from getting up, and what I want to ask that, and I want to ask how do you get over creative blocks?
Right. The typical days, get up and check the news, and then ignore it. Let me turn my phone off. Typical days, the dog gets us up fairly early, so we're up and about, and then try to get her out for she needs like an hour walk a day, which is good in a way. So there's a lot of trails around. So get out, breathe the fresh air, and then to get in the studio. I try to get like a good 4 hours at a chunk, just to get into a flow, and but there's usually drawing for ideas, research, do a lot of research on other art and artists, and enjoy that, and then but just daily doing something artistic, and the block, the creativity block, is it occasionally happens, but I think between the sculpture is sort of a lot different. It's sort of reductive. I like working with solid chunks of wood, so it's a lot of editing and back, so it's a little different than the paintings, which are building up a surface and thing. So if I'm sort of stuck on one, I can switch to another, and it's sort of as things catch my eye, and so
it sounds like you really are kind of heart-led when you go in, and it's not all in the head.
Yeah. If I have a deadline for something, then it's sort of buckle
Pressure.
down. Okay, dropping, and that gets into flow, and there's a lot of back and forth in the water or skies. There's a lot of getting it to where, to me, it feels right, and so there's a lot of sort of letting the mind sort of wander and then stepping back a lot.
Yeah. I mean, you could go into the studio with any number of different energy, from how the walk went in the morning to the deadline looming.
Yeah.
So you really just kind of have to, I would think, center and get into it with whatever's being called.
Yeah. And winter's interesting because it's usually it starts have some time to explore and in terms of styles and stuff. And,
Okay, well, I know you're not opposed to reworking a piece if it's not working, or you find, and I believe this was this one that you needed to cut down, or?
Yeah, that one was more of a rectangular piece, and again, just thinking about a composition, take pieces of cardboard and hold them up.
Oh, great idea.
To say, okay, or even corners of mat board, like two L's, and you just sort of, okay, would that work better as a square? So in this case, it was, and then it's figuring out where and sort of putting tape to make sure, and then.
Yep.
But.
And the one behind you, again with that dark and that light. I don't know if you can see it that well, but I'll put a little one in so that you can get a closer look. But that one really, really speaks to me because that one boat behind is more in shadow, and the light in the one in front.
And it's just compositionally, the boats can almost become like balloons. I mean, in a way, they're almost floating on tethers. And this one just sort of goes off, and contrasting, there's a red rope so you're sort of leading the eye out and back and down, and then the water is always fun to sort of get lost in.
Yeah, I mean, for me it really kind of dances. It's got that lovely movement to the whole thing. Should we talk about your sculpture?
Sure, these are a couple newer ones.
Let's talk about this one first, and again, I'll put a still in so you can get a better look. But yeah.
And this is Maine ash, the solid plank on a steel base and aluminum top. And so I lay out, the inspiration for this was walking along a river down the street here and watching water drop off a bridge and hitting the water, and just studying the rings, and the idea of that sort of the two worlds, the water world and the air world. And I don't know if you can see, but there's the holes that pierce through. Gold leaf here. These are copper nails, and then stainless steel nails, and gold leaf on the inside. And then this side is palladium or platinum leaf. The worlds sort of meet and then pierce each other and interact, and then the rings themselves overlapping effects.
And there's no border.
Right.
So yeah, very nice.
And it is interesting. They do sort of relate in a way back to the wood blocks, because they are almost two-dimensional in a way. I mean, there's a face. My natural forms, like birds and fish, tend to be in the round and move in the wind and things. But the plank forms, the bigger ones, stand outside in fields or on stainless steel pins in the ground, so they stand upright. So those. Yeah,
tell us about this one. These were fun.
Thank you. Yeah, this is.
Over so you can see it a little better.
Over the years, I've done lots and lots of figure drawing, and those are very sort of spot on and natural, trying to get the figure, and then I thought in wood, let's try to reduce that down to just an interesting composition. So this is a figure, and this is titled Hara, which is Japanese for center, which is about, I think, 2 fingers width below your belly button, which is just,
The creative chakra.
Yeah, is that what it is?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, and so moving from your center, and in terms of breathing and stuff. But so that's the Hara, and then just I wanted to give indications of the figure, just a little, the contrapposto, or the skewing is just here, and so it's a very formal form, and a plank that's been cut out, and then the finish is interesting. It's a Japanese technique where you, this one is ash as well, you get a blowtorch and burn the entire surface.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
So that's burned.
it's burnt and then oiled. So
Oh, so that's why it doesn't rub off.
yeah, and it allows the grain to come through, and you can. It's a little sort of a leap of faith, burning wood and
Torching
watching
it.
it burn, and it's smoking, and you're like with a little water gun, knock it back. But the benefit is it seals the cells, and they use it outside as and you'll see it in some homes and things for the finish. But it's a lovely black, and
It's beautiful.
with the gold leaf insets, it jumps.
I'll put another still in for that one too, because they're really worthy.
So some of them are figure-based, and other ones are more abstract, with like rings or like a sun on the horizon idea, or even just a composition of how the holes interact.
So one other question for you, because of the birds. We talked about the sculpture earlier, but you seem to do a lot of birds as well. Is that something meaningful for you, or is that more fun, or?
Just a representation of movement, freedom. Around here in the spring, we have a lot of barn and tree swallows, and again, walking the dog on fields, and you see them come in, and just stand back and observe them, and just that looks fun. This is also a good composition. This is a flagpole along the coast. You'll see people will unbolt them and then lower them when they leave in the summer.
Is there anything that I haven't asked that you would like to share?
Let's see. We talked about the flow and losing track of time, and that's sort of ideal in a way. Because I'll get.
I hear that often.
My wife will be like 6:30, and she's like, "You want to eat dinner or something?" Oh, geez, where'd the time? So again.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
I think we're going to go out and check his studio. That should be fun. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us at John's studio. John, thank you for allowing us.
Thank you, Beth. Welcome, and glad you could stop in and check out the space.
It's a big, beautiful space, and I'll show you around in a minute, or put some stills in between now and then. But how long have you been in this space?
We built it's a garage with a dedicated studio over in 1999, so a while. And I got to design it so it's the high space for thinking, and the walls don't come down too much, so I can get right to the walls for storage. And
yeah, great. What were your other studio spaces like before this one?
A lot smaller, and like a back bedroom, and try not to work in oils too much because old turpentine, so I don't use turpentine so much anymore. But that would really limit the environmental.
the quality of life living in something like that. I had started from a small space as well, so you do have to really kind of be aware of what you're working with in your environment. So what would you say is your greatest takeaway from being trained as a professional, to be a professional artist?
School. I went to the School of Visual Arts and graduated in '82 in New York, and I went for illustration, and that allowed me to sort of draw a lot. I was into doing a lot of drawing, and especially editorial, black and white, the old pen and ink style, where the line had a lot of sort of a human quality and a living quality. And then moving up, and I did that for about 10 years, and then moving up here, looked around and sort of thought more about color and the landscape, so it was a good opportunity. We've been here since '92, so in Maine.
Cool. Yeah. So what is your education background? What school did you first go to?
I went to Plymouth State in New Hampshire, Plymouth State College back then. I think it's Plymouth State University now. And just took sort of general art, and I had the photography teacher was also my counselor, so I was just taking like 5 studio art classes a semester. He was like, shouldn't you be taking English? I'm like, no, because I knew I was probably going to transfer. So after 3 semesters, I left Plymouth State and then went to New York, the School of Visual Arts.
Oh, cool. So how long did it take you in New York?
So that was about 2.5 years. Luckily, all those credits transferred.
Yes.
So I picked right up, and then mostly studied illustration and centered on black and white, and was doing wood block prints and linoleum prints as well at that time. And then we had moved into Midtown from, we were out in Queens for a while, and then in Midtown, our landlord was a pretty well-known painter and sculptor, and he would say, hey, John, you want to go paint in the park? And I'd be like, okay.
So who is this?
That was Jim Josephs, and he was an interesting guy. I think he's still around in California, and he moved to California or Hawaii, and but very, very kind guy, interesting. And we'd go out to the park and set up, and I had like no idea really about color. so I'd sort of watch him, and he'd explain warm and cool and how you could, how that affects the depth and how moving in and out of the painting and affect the mood and stuff. So after that, really started thinking about color as a language and to get emotions across, and how light is expressed in color. And,
very cool. Well, why don't we move the camera and take a look at some of John's work.
Talking about the black and white, I worked for about a month and a half, I think, at the Wall Street Journal, and I'm not sure if you're familiar, but they look like little wood engravings. The black and white images, mostly of people, and it seems like there's one person doing it, but there was a staff of like 6 people, and they give us photographs. And this is one I did of Fred Rogers way back when.
Mr. Rogers.
So, and he's an inspiration.
Yes, for everyone.
And so it was all dots. It was sort of a formula, and I was there about a month and a half, and then I was like,
nice.
And moved on from there. But it was fun. Experience.
Very cool.
Thank you.
And influenced by Fred Rogers.
Fred, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I had a younger sister. I was 16 when she was born, so I would hang out with her and watch Mr. Rogers.
Oh, perfect.
And early Sesame Street stuff. And so,
I got that with my kids.
Yeah.
So what would you like to show us?
Let's see. we were talking about color and mood, and I like a lot of photographers like early in the morning or late in the afternoon. The sun, the angle of the sun, especially here in Maine, is very interesting. You know, it adds more drama and picks out things. This is a picture of a guide. We've done a lot of windjammer trips, so this is one of the guys in the windjammer trip.
Take it a little closer so you guys can see it while you talk about it.
So there's a lot of, I played around with the composition. So the oar he's holding actually touches the shore, you know, metaphorically. It's so he's leaning to go there, and so that was something I did. That's part of the illustration background, adding things or moving things, and this.
Yeah, I'll just interject because I'm seeing something that I recognize through your work. You often do a darker foreground and move into the light. Is that something that you think about, or?
Yeah, just sort of anchor the scene, and or to try to looking at a lot of Homer and Hopper paintings. He plays with diagonals, and so try to anchor and have a movement.
Now, see, that's a perfect example of seeing something that you like about someone else's work and bringing it in and making it your own.
Right.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, the Homer show at the Portland Museum a few years back was great, and I went 4 or 5 times. And you look at how he's gluing on pieces of canvas onto his canvas,
Wow.
and ripping away paper from watercolors to get back to like a highlight, and you're like, you can't do that, but yes, you can. So it works.
All fair, right?
And and again, the angle of the light, cutting off and highlighting here and the top.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, very nice. Let's look at another example.
And here's not a boat painting, but tree painting. I like trees as sort of singular trees are very interesting. This is a pine tree up at Pineland in New Gloucester, and a field, and I push the colors here to bring out the sun coming across it and pop the one edge.
I love the way the clouds are sweeping.
Yeah.
And I mean, when you're in the throes of painting, how do you decide what goes behind the tree and what doesn't?
Yeah, a lot of the clouds start. I have an idea when I sketch them out, what I'm looking at, but then in the process of painting it's a back and forth, and things get obscured and then brought back, and it's hard. It's easy to just sort of, not kill it, but sort of deaden it, and so to leave some of the canvas almost lighter.
Okay. All right. Let's look at another one. So we were at the acrylic station and all of John's storage area, and to talk about his other finished works in grayscale, we've moved over to the oil station, and this is one of his grayscale examples.
2020, it's good. 2020, I was playing around with black and white grayscales, making my own out of different kinds of white and different kinds of black. There's like an ivory black, which is sort of warm, a spinel black, which is actually a ground semi-precious gemstone or stone, and Mars black, and different whites like a radiant white and ultra white, and mixing them with fast drying whites as well. And then I so here are different. I made them up and then put them in tubes, and then what I did was get rid of I did them like from 1 to 10, and I got rid of the 1 and the 10. So I got rid of the white, the pure white, and I got rid of the pure black.
So which is the warmer black?
An ivory black.
An ivory
Yeah.
black. And the Mars black is the cooler black?
Cooler, and the spindle is more neutral. So
Okay. And why the little dots, if you can see that? There's these little dots in.
So when you're working on the painting, I was trying to match or figure out where a value was, you just hold this up and you squint, and where it sort of disappears is
perfect.
The value
Nice.
that you relate
Good hint.
to the two. Yeah.
Thank you.
And that works, for colors and stuff. So here you're like, okay, where's the? Because in white and lights, it's all. I often paint lighter than I think, and then by using a value scale, you're like, oh, that really is a little darker than you'd think, and then it gives you room to move up later. And I thought by getting rid of pure white and pure black, that I don't know if your eye would notice it, but your eye would fill in.
Sure.
I wanted to sort of constrain the range.
When did you decide to do a grayscale painting? I know you've got several of them.
This was I was part of sort of self-education. It was like, I need to figure out values better, and with so many colors it can be confusing. So thought I'd dial it back, and then in the Renaissance and stuff, they would basically do an underpainting, I think, Grizel and grays, black and whites, and as a foundation, and then it'd be easier to you sort of match those values in that color,
Oh.
and then and glaze over that. But so I thought, I'll do a bunch of series of 10 of these bigger paintings as the underpainting, but then I started liking how it turned out just as they are.
There's a lot of color in there. Your eye does want to fill that in. Like the warms really have like more of a yellow in them.
Yeah. And pull in surrounding reflected colors. And so I did mostly boats. It's a subject that interests me, the lines and the curves, the way they work in the water and reflect a little of the personality of their owners.
It really is kind of risky, though, because, as a viewer coming up and looking at it, it's not always understood, and you leave yourself open to really having to bring a different or a more clear message, I want to say, to the painting, because if it was color, you just, walk right into it.
Yeah. And as the viewer, how you respond to the color, right? It's like, I like the warms, the cools, or that highlight,
So it's almost like it's got to be more accurate and, tell a bigger story.
It's interesting. Yeah, and I spend a lot of time on composition, sketching out and moving around, and so the black one might help that as well. That sort of comes from the woodblock prints, just designing an image
and going with it. Yeah.
Grab another.
Yeah, let's look at another. So tell us about this one.
Okay, this is another of the grayscale paintings, and again, when we were talking about composition, just sort of circling around in a quiet spot, sort of getting rid of the horizon. It sort of focuses you into the boats in the water.
So John, this really does speak to that unique style that I was talking about when we were at the gallery, that nice quiet solitude, almost like a meditative moment. At least that's how I see your work. It's peaceful and serene. So how is it that you figured out your unique style with that?
But a lot of, in terms of Japanese art, meditating, grinding the inks and things, and in preparation, just sort of get your breathing down and let your mind go away for a while.
Right,
And,
karate.
Yeah, and karate. And yeah, in karate we had an expression, I took it for a while, called ren ma, and it's Japanese for to polish, and it references either like a mirror or your soul or yourself, because artists can be a little tough on themselves.
Yeah,
or
yeah.
their own worst critics. So, but from the illustration, the black and white led to the wood blocks, and that led to some sculpture, and then just a way of thinking about a composition. And there's a couple of, this is a Japanese shika munakata.
You can take it closer if you
and,
like.
And just the simplicity, like pulling things or editing things down, and then, as in the paintings, let little details like where the ropes and oarlocks and things sort of catch the viewer's interest, and then let the water have and the paint have its own space.
It really does have a beautiful movement to it. You can almost hear the water lapping.
And let's see, this is Jeff Koons, who you might be familiar with that. It's a stainless steel molded, like a rabbit that you could find on the Midway, and I always thought it was very funny and interesting on a lot of different levels. So that's sort of an inspiration in the three-dimensional, in the form.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
And John does sculpt,
Yeah.
so we'll be looking at some of the sculpture in a minute as well. Was there anything else you'd like to share about the grayscale?
Maybe one more?
Okay, let's look at one more. So here's another painting.
Okay, this one is called Crab Fishing, and it's just kids on a dock, and a lot of this was several different images sort of put together. The kids were from, I think, hanging out on the beach, throwing stones and stuff. And, the dock and the boat is in Harpswell, and then added the crab fishing just to imagine what they're doing out there. And this one has a sort of hazy mood, like late afternoon.
Definitely has a time period
Yeah.
to it, because there's not like a lot of striking difference between the light.
Right.
But so when you get to the sign, which I love it being upside down because that's so Maine,
Yes.
but in the boat, you really grabs you first.
This is near Cook's Lobster House.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a little, I think a ferry gets off there. And that's like an old speed limit sign someone's used the other side for. So you're seeing it upside down. And there's steps for the people to come off.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So maybe we should move on over and look at some sculpture.
Sure.
All right. So here we are with some of John's sculpture, and I'm going to just let him tell you about these. They're fun to play with.
And these are bird forms. I do barn swallows, swifts, and these there are specific types of birds, and these are just more general birds in flight. And I tend to edit them back, and concerned with the way the wings and the silhouette look, less so than feathers and eyes and things. So it's about the form and space, and figuring out, where to attach it, and how the light comes over and defines the edges. And these are mahogany with 24 karat gold leaf on them. And it's just, I've done some natural and some in palladium or platinum leaf, but the gold is nice, and works with a lot.
Yes, we've had several in the gallery, and he also does fish form, which is pretty interesting too. You actually won the, what was that, where you did the fish out at the Maine Wildlife and
Audubon? No.
Wasn't the Audubon one, because it was Audubon too, but the Maine Arts Commission, the one that I helped you.
Right, that was at the Maine Wildlife Center in Gray. And
Yeah.
this was 3 alewives in platinum leaf, so silver, that are wall mounted in one of in their conference area in one of their buildings.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what is it like to have to install these? Do you go and do that yourself?
I generally do, and the bigger ones, and these I also do these in bronze, and those are heavier and have sturdier poles. For mostly indoor, I would keep these indoors, but the other ones, the larger ones, can go outdoors, and the bronze ones stay out all year. And I generally work from solid blocks of wood, and it's a little different from the painting in that you're taking away. So
I was just going to ask, is you got to put on a different hat for this.
Yeah, it's a nice. The first ones, the fish forms and things took quite a while because
Yeah.
And now bang, 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 you know. And they do. I have a bunch of sort of.
Yeah, why don't you
over
go
there.
grab what you need and come back? We'll pause for a second and you can show us the
Fish, and then there's those.
Oh yeah.
And here is sort of my standard model I keep for reference. So this is mahogany, and there are, on the fish, there are slight carvings. I have an interest also in Inuit art, how they combine people and animal spirits, and just not too fussy, just get the gill down, an eye.
Do you want to take that a little closer?
Yeah.
I can always put a still in as well.
And I again stay sort of away from a lot of the fins. It's sort of as they're moving in the water. And I will play with the way the tails curve. And they do a lot of these in groups. So you'll see a school. On posts outside, and the wind moves, and they'll all do their thing, which is kind of fun.
I had fun at the gallery making them swim differently.
Put the pan on.
Yeah.
And
so,
with the birds here, this is sort of a mock-up that we did for clients who wanted to see what they would look like outside. So we put a little tube, and they would could spray paint those, and they can go
very nice.
Figure out.
This would be like the preliminary, and get that yes from the client, and then you could really move into the real thing.
Right, and think about where they're going in the environment, and that works. And these are swifts, and they're quite a bit larger than these guys. So, and these also are in bronze.
Very nice. Yeah. Well, we're going to move over to some unfinished work and see what the process is like. So we're going to look at some unfinished work now, work that is in progress. So John, tell us about this piece.
Okay, this is probably a little more than halfway done. Just a boat. This is at Fort Popham, Maine, and again, sort of getting rid of the horizon, and you can see the sort of pencil in everything first, and roughly where the water and the seaweed and things are. And then I generally leave the boat to last, just to try to figure out the values in the water and the wharf and stuff. And
is it wet?
This one is not.
Okay, I just want to bring it a little bit closer so that they can see the pencil. Perfect.
That's another, if you look at like a lot of Winslow Homer watercolors, you can see, if you look, you're like, oh, there he's just indicated.
See the pencil.
The boat, yeah. And here's
look at
just
that.
using tape, so it's a little hard to see, but
wow.
there are these haul-out ropes, and so I tape them in so I don't have to fuss around with them, and just go back later and peel that off, and then work on the line. So this is getting there, just a lot of sort of cleaning up and tightening up here, and then leaving it a little looser in the water.
Can't wait to see this one in the gallery.
Right, this one, I like this one. Another one? Or
sure, yeah, let's look at another.
These might be wet. Here's, I'll bring it up a little closer.
Yeah, go ahead and just
So
let them
again,
see that
the
pencil.
Pencil and this is oil over here.
So is there, what do you struggle with when you're painting, when something's not working? What does that look like to you?
It's like sort of getting rid of things, and then this one's gone sort of back and forth in the water a lot. Just trying to establish sort of the tone, and these will have to get darker, and then I'll have to. It was a little too monochromatic, so I'll pull in some lighter, like a diagonal through the water coming across, just to sort of create some interest across the canvas, and then playing with the boat.
Yeah. Do you ever struggle with the palette, or are you always pretty clear about what you're going to do with the color?
Generally clear, but once I get in there, then it's sort of the back and forth.
Yeah.
Is it too warm? Is it too cool? Is it? And the depending on the paint, certain paints will sort of sink in and almost have a dried out feeling. So after they sort of set up drying, you can put a little Gamsol in this case, but it's like turpentine, just to sort of wet it, and it'll bring up the colors, almost like a quick varnish.
Yeah.
Just to see you, because here I can see they're all sort of sinking in.
Which is something you can do to spruce up an old painting as well.
Right.
Sometimes they'll get dull, and having done the restoration, it's better to just give it some color to heighten everything. Yeah, very nice. Great.
Just do one more, and this is the last one was canvas. This one's cradled panel, so it's birch. And again, this one is sort of what we were talking about before. That's sort of not working. and I've got to figure out whether it'll be darker, lighter, or warmer.
So do you live with it for a while, or do you turn it to the wall, or upside down? What do you do?
I'll work on like 3, 5 plus paintings at a time, And then, because the oil, the way it sets up, sometimes you let it dry a little bit, or a day or two, and then it's got a sort of a tack, or it won't rub off, so it's easier blending. Or if you want it wet on wet, just like the next day, if you want to blend in areas, then that's a lot easier when it's wet. But this, I'll have to either break that up a little, it's just too solid.
Yeah.
And
very nice. Great. So, John, tell us about some of your influences. What has inspired you through the year?
In painting, a lot of Winslow Homer and Hopper. I remember as a little kid going to see, I was in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, and Homer's painting of the fox in winter and the snowdrifts with the big crows. Just sort of, stunned, because you can imagine the fox and the crows, they're hungry enough to hunt a fox, and and then the whole winter scene with the
so
surf
brilliant,
and stuff.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Let's see if I can find an image to pop in here as we're talking about it, because that is pretty remarkable. Lighting too. The light in that is just amazing.
Yeah, the shadows and just the little berries on the on the thorn bushes or something. Yeah. And then Hopper, for his light, I think I'm paraphrasing when he said, "I just want to paint light on things," which is great. And I'll just do that and sort of stop, in the afternoon. You'll see light on a barn or picking out a tree or a boat on the water. And just like,
Yeah.
just how it can sort of infuse sort of emotion.
Do you always have your antenna up? I mean, like on your way to grocery shop, or
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's like,
these days you have to pull over, but like even in Yarmouth driving, depending if the moon will come up certain times, or even just the way the clouds will build in the afternoon, and we go down to the Yarmouth public boat landing a lot, and that's interesting because the tides come in and out, and for dinner you just hang out and watch the seagulls and the tide. And you see deer down there.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Let's see, other painters. Alex Katz, I like his simplicity and the compositions. His night scenes, I think they were seen from like trains and stuff, just windows.
Oh, cool.
But for mood. And for sculpture, Jean Arc, French, and Aristide Maillot, who did a lot of monumental looking figures.
Nice.
Right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I just have one more question about your unfinished work and how you're brought to begin a piece to begin with. What is your research? How do you...
A lot of just traveling along the coast. The gazetteer is a very handy tool. Anywhere there's a boat launch symbol, I'll go check out, or towns with wharves. But I'll go sketch, and especially like wharves and things, just to get an idea in my hand what's caught my eye, and then I'll take pictures. I work mostly in the studio. I used to do some plein air, but I find the light moves too fast for me. The shadows keep changing, so I'm like, But then I'll come back, look through those photographs, generally on the computer, and I'll find what caught my eye and print it out fairly large. I got a 13 by 19 printer, so I'll print that out big and then play with that, and then do sketches and transfer that to the canvas,
Oh, wow.
and then start in with the painting. That's for the painting.
Mm-hmm.
The sculpture is generally more abstract and more about an idea, like the sun on the water, or bands on the horizon, or fish moving, or birds. So that's just a lot of sketching until it feels right, and then I try to work that up to scale,
Mm-hmm.
and then in that case then just start carving. I do some commissions in sculpture, but a lot of it's just me following what feels interesting.
Yeah. So how do you think people find you? Do they see your sculpture out there? I mean, I know galleries can be helpful in that way too,
Mhm.
in gaining a larger audience, but what have been some of your experiences to do a commission?
The recent one was in Yarmouth, the Public Arts Commission in Yarmouth commissioned me to do a series of 7 bronze birds down near, there's a skating pond along Main Street, and they had seen sculpture at a couple of local shows, and I think even Audubon, and had been in a couple of people's heads for a few years, and it took a few years to work out space and timing and budgets and things. So, but that was very collaborative. They had a great committee in terms of working with the state and the town and town engineer, and so.
Very nice.
Yeah.
That took a lot to have come together.
It did, yeah. It was interesting, the process.
Well, it's
yeah.
nice to know that your work is at the center of that.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
and
it's
all
fun
of that, you know, to make it happen.
to drive
It's
by
beautiful.
and wave to the birds. See them.
Mm.
Yeah.
So should we move on to a piece of sculpture that's in progress?
Sure, yeah.
All right, we'll be right over there. So tell us about the process when it comes to sculpture.
Okay. Again, working from little scraps of paper or very large to keep it loose, pages to get an idea down. Once I do and I figure out what I have for materials, I like to work with sort of large slabs of mahogany or Maine ash wood, and then I'll figure out, like in this case, this is a template for similar to the ones in the studio we talked about, I mean in the gallery that we talked about with the rings. So this was sketched out, and
Yeah, take it right up there so you can get a good look.
right, so this is
Very
where the
nice.
rings of nails and the holes would be where the punch through and the gold leaf would go, and bands of gold leaf. And, so that's an idea of a template that I would lay that out and then use that to start carving. This is a older piece that's being reworked. The title is Palimpsest, which is like the parchment they used in the Middle Ages was, I think, lambskin, and pretty labor intensive to get that page, so they would scrape off lettering and reuse it.
Oh, very cool.
And occasionally over time, the words that were there before would float up.
Oh.
So sort of a ghost image. And this,
Yeah, cool.
This is mahogany that's been burnt and oiled. That's, you get this sort of interesting black, and it has a top that's carved from a block of mahogany and fit, so it will, and copper ends, so that protects the end grain up here.
What kind of lacquer is that?
This is
Finish.
almost like I think an outdoor, it's called Black Mirror. It's by a company called Culture Hustle. They're out of England, and they do some really interesting paints and pigments and things. CultureHustleUSA.com if you want to look about that.
Yes.
And so this was a piece of old copper that's been folded and nailed in through the board into itself, and then gold leafed. And it's been left by, I think, more to the name. This will get gold leafed as well. So this side had some just sort of calligraphic symbols on it, and a little hard to see if it'll come out. But
I'll take some stills too, so that you can get a real good look at the nail heads on this side, and on the other side, it's the actual spiky part of the nail on the back side.
that recently got gold leaf, so I like just the tone, and I think out in the woods this will look interesting, just a flash of.
Yes.
And then if you get close to look at it, you'll see almost like a brush stroke. And this sits on stainless steel pins in the ground, so it sits upright in a field or garden. And this is again sort of Japanese influence, with sort of a roof
Yes.
to protect it, and almost like
The
a sign
elements.
in a way.
Mm.
A sign that doesn't talk about anything particular, but just
Well, it's going to be visually riveting.
right. Yeah.
So I think we're done. This was
Oh.
just remarkable. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Beth, and thank you for coming into the studio. And if you have any questions about pictures, sculpture technique, just want to chat, you can reach me through Beth at the gallery.
Of course. Yep, and just leave your comments below, or you can reach me through Yarmouth Frame and Gallery, the website. There's email there at the bottom of the homepage. And if you'd like to see more of John's work in person, he's in the gallery year-round, and we have an abundance of pieces there for you to look at up close and personal. So I'm going to post all of the links, try to remember them all as I edit this, and put them in the description box below. But please feel free to leave comments and questions here, either for us or for John, or any part of what we've accomplished here today.
All right. Thank you.
So thank you.